special Thanksgiving show. I was recently asked a question about James chapter 5 verses 1 through 8. The inquirer wanted to know if it had a special message for today. To be honest, I had not really carefully studied this passage in that light before. I was shocked to find that his message really does apply to the end times and the situation we're in right now. Listen to what the Apostle James says. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in the last days. Indeed, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out. And the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury. You have fattened your hearts as in a day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the just. He does not resist you. First, note the time to which this prophecy applies. It is to the last days, just before the Lord Jesus returns. Second, it is addressed to a very particular kind of rich person. That would be from a long line of those who became wealthy by defrauding the laborers of their wages. This is very important to note because the Bible does not condemn everyone who is rich. It is not a sin to have money. It's just a sin for money to have you. The Bible teaches, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. I've seen the Lord bless some with much wealth because they use it to help the Lord's work. But James predicts that there would be some extremely rich people who gain their wealth by defrauding the vast majority of those who do the labor for the economy. Yet the Lord will cause their wealth to become a snare to them, because the world's economy will collapse around everyone, both the rich and the poor. And apparently, the greed of the rich will cause them to steal so much that the entire world economy will collapse. I believe that there is one group of rich people that perfectly fit this prophecy. One man conceived a brilliant plan to defraud more money from more people than anyone in history. He announced the essence of his strategy when he said, "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes its laws." Mayor Amschel Rothschild gathered and trained many disciples who worked with him to form an international system of central banks. Many of our greatest leaders warned about the danger of a central banking system. Thomas Jefferson, on the occasion of the first attempt of the money trust to establish a central bank in America, warned, if the people ever allow the banks to issue their currency, the banks and corporations which will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. President James Madison warned, history records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. President Andrew Jackson, who squashed an effort to establish a central bank, warned, if Congress has the right under the Constitution to issue paper money, it was given them to use themselves, not be delegated to individuals or corporations. The U.S. Constitution specifies that only the Congress has the right to issue and control currency. President Abraham Lincoln gave one of the most powerful warnings against a central bank in America. He said, the money powers prey on the nations in times of peace and conspire against it in times of adversity. The banking powers are more despotic than monarchy, more insolent than autocracy, more selfish than bureaucracy. They denounce as public enemies all who question their methods or throw light upon their crimes. I have two great enemies, the Southern Army in front of me and the bankers in the rear. Of the two, the one at my rear is my greatest foe. The money power will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people until the wealth is aggregated in the hands of a few and the republic is destroyed. In the beginning of the 20th century, the money power finally succeeded in establishing a central banking system that would totally control America's money. It was sneaked into existence after most of the members of the U.S. Congress had left for the Christmas holidays of 1913. Under President Woodrow Wilson, a skeleton Congress passed into law a system that would rob Americans of their freedom and wealth. It was cleverly disguised in its name, the Federal Reserve Act. At the same time, the personal income tax system was enacted so that the government would be able to pay the Federal Reserve Board for its services. The Federal Reserve System is neither federal nor is it a reserve of money. It's controlled by a powerful international bankers group, most of whom are not American. They answer only to themselves. America's elected Congress not only has no control over the Fed, but has no idea of its innermost activities. No real audit has ever been allowed by the Federal Reserve. In 1934, at the height of the Great Depression, Congressman Lewis T. McFadden of Pennsylvania courageously exposed what had happened. He declared, "Every effort has been made by the Federal Reserve Board to conceal its power. But the truth is, the Federal Reserve Board has usurped the government of the United States. It controls everything here, and it controls our foreign relations. It makes or breaks government at will. No man and no body of men is more entrenched in power than the arrogant credit monopoly which operates the Federal Reserve Board and Federal Reserve banks. These evildoers have robbed the country of more than enough money to pay the national debt. What the national government has permitted the Federal Reserve Board to steal from the people should now be returned to the people. The people have a valid claim against the Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Reserve banks. If that claim is enforced, Americans will not need to stand in bread lines. Homes will be saved. Families will be kept. The Federal Reserve Act should be repealed, and the Federal Reserve banks, having violated their charters, should be liquidated immediately. Faithless government officers who have violated their oaths of office should be impeached and brought to trial. And now, due to the insidious action of the money trust of central bankers, the economy of the world is tied to one basic system. This means that if one part fails, the entire system will fail. I believe that we are on the brink of seeing the world economic system collapse, and that will set up the coming of the Antichrist. But don't be dismayed. After his description of the corrupted riches of these last days, the Apostle James taught the true believer how to respond to the events around him. Therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the early and latter rain. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand." You know, we have something to really give thanks about because we have the answer to the greatest dilemma. Jesus said, "What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and yet lose his soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? No amount of riches